In a forgotten industrial district, the luxury car of a wealthy female CEO breaks down on a cold gray afternoon. Stranded, frustrated and nearly exhausted, she is on the edge until a middle-aged black man steps out of an old warehouse, his hands stained with grease, his expression calm. He opens the hood, silently diagnoses the problem, fixes it, and brings the engine back to life, taking no money and asking no name. What she doesn't know is that this chance encounter will shatter her empire, expose a rotten system, and lead them both toward a future neither believed was possible. The autumn morning in Southfield arrived the way it always did. Quiet, cold, gray light pushing through clouds that never seemed to leave. Caleb stood in his garage with a coffee mug that had gone cold an hour ago. He didn't notice. His hands were already inside the belly of a lawnmower that belonged to Mrs. Patterson 3 houses down. She'd brought it over last Tuesday. Said it made a sound like something dying. Caleb told her he'd take a look. That was what he always said. I'll take a look. Sometimes they paid him. Sometimes they forgot. Sometimes they remembered weeks later and showed up with a pie or a bag of tomatoes from their garden. He never complained, never reminded them. The work came and went like weather, unpredictable, just enough to keep the lights on, never enough to breathe easy. His phone buzzed on the workbench, a text from Pastor Williams. Caleb, the heating system at the church is making that noise again. Can you come by this afternoon? He typed back a single word. Yes, then he returned to the lawnmower. His fingers moved with a kind of memory that didn't need thinking. 32 years of touching machines, learning their secrets, understanding what broke and why and how to make it whole again. He could diagnose an engine by sound alone, could feel a failing bearing through his fingertips before any gauge would catch it. These were gifts, he knew that. Gifts that should have meant something, should have opened doors, but doors had a way of staying closed when you looked like him. When your resume was your reputation and your reputation only traveled as far as the neighborhood. He finished the lawnmower by noon. Walked it back to Mrs. Patterson's porch. She wasn't home. He left it there with a note tucked under the handle. Fixed the carburetor. Blade was dull too, so I sharpened it. No rush on payment. He knew she'd probably forget. That was fine. She was 78 years old and living alone, and her husband had died the same year Caleb's father did. Some things mattered more than money. The afternoon took him to the church. A building that had seen better decades. Paint peeling. Pews worn smooth by generations of Sunday mornings. But the congregation kept it alive, kept it breathing, and Caleb kept the heating system running on prayers and spare parts he bought with his own money when the church fund came up short. Pastor Williams met him at the side door, a tall man with kind eyes and hands that were always reaching out to touch your shoulder, your arm, to make you feel seen. Caleb, thank you for coming so quick. It's no trouble, Pastor. The Lord blessed us when He sent you to this community. Caleb didn't answer that. He just nodded and walked toward the basement where the old furnace lived. It was a beast, 40 years old at least, should have been replaced a decade ago. But replacement cost money, and money was something this church measured in faith rather than dollars. He spent 2 hours down there, replacing a relay, cleaning ducts, talking to the machine the way he talked to all machines. Quiet, patient, listening more than speaking. When he came back up, his shirt was soaked with sweat and dust covered his forearms like ash. How bad is it? Pastor Williams asked. She's tired, Caleb said. But she'll make it through another winter, maybe 2 if we're gentle with her. The pastor pressed a folded 20 into his hand. Caleb tried to give it back. The pastor closed his fingers around it and shook his head. You have a family to feed, Caleb. Take it. He took it. Not because he wanted to. Because he knew the pastor needed to give it. Some people showed love through receiving, others through giving. You had to know which kind you were dealing with. That night he sat at the kitchen table with his wife Denise. She was grading papers, 6th grade math, red pen moving across worksheets like a surgeon's scalpel. Their daughter Maya was in her room, 17 years old and already carrying the weight of dreams that felt too big for this house, this neighborhood, this life. She wanted to study engineering, had the grades for it, had the mind for it. What she didn't have was the money, and Caleb felt that absence every single day like a stone in his chest. The Whitmore contract. Denise said without looking up. Did you hear back? He had. That was the problem. The Whitmore Group owned a chain of warehouses across the state. They needed someone to overhaul their refrigeration systems. It was a big job. The kind of job that could change everything. Caleb had submitted his proposal 3 weeks ago. Detailed, professional, priced fairly. He knew he could do the work better than any contractor they'd find. He knew it in his bones. They went with someone else. Denise's pen stopped moving. They said I didn't have the proper certifications. Said my insurance wasn't comprehensive enough for a project that size. He paused. The guy who answered the phone asked me twice if I was the actual contractor or just the assistant. Denise set down her pen. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. They'd had this conversation before. Different names, different companies, same story. The world had a way of looking at Caleb and deciding what he was before he ever opened his mouth, before he ever showed what his hands could do. There's a new logistics company setting up in Lakeview Heights, he said. Marcus told me they're hiring maintenance staff. I could apply. Caleb. Her voice was soft. You'd be working for someone else. Punching a clock. You built something here. You built a reputation. A reputation that doesn't pay Maya's tuition. She reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were warm. Familiar. 23 years of marriage lived in that touch. Something will come, she said. It always does. He wanted to believe her. He used to believe her. But lately the believing had gotten harder. Lately he'd started to wonder if the world had simply decided he wasn't worth the trouble. If all his skill, all his knowledge, all his years of doing good work for good people amounted to nothing more than a man fixing lawnmowers in his garage, waiting for the phone to ring, hoping the next call would be different. It never was, but Caleb kept answering anyway, because that was who he was. A man who fixed things, even when no one asked. Even when no one paid, even when the world looked right through him like he wasn't there at all. Especially then. Evelyn Cross had not seen the sunrise in 11 years, not because she woke up late. She woke up at 4:45 every morning, always had. But her days began in darkness and moved through glass and steel and fluorescent light until darkness came again. The sun was something that happened to other people. People with time. People with the luxury of standing still. Her office occupied the corner of the 32nd floor of the Ashford building in Lakeview Heights. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a view that real estate agents called commanding. She never looked at it. The desk faced inward, toward the door, toward whoever was coming next with whatever problem needed solving. There was always a problem. There was always someone coming. This morning it was Daniel Kerr, Chief Financial Officer, a man who smiled too much and meant too little. He stood in her doorway holding a tablet like it was a shield. The quarterly numbers are in. And, we beat projections by 6%. Which projections? The ones we published or the ones we actually expected? He hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. Both, he said finally. We beat both. She nodded, turned back to her laptop. The meeting was over. He didn't realize it yet. He stood there for another moment, waiting for something. Praise maybe. Acknowledgement. Some sign that what he'd delivered mattered. Close the door on your way out, she said. He did. Evelyn pulled up the next report, read 3 sentences. Her eyes drifted to the window. Outside, the city sprawled in every direction. Millions of people living millions of lives, none of them touching hers. She had built this company from a single warehouse and a loan she'd had to beg for. 26 years, 70-hour weeks. Holidays that were just quieter days at the office. She had sacrificed everything for this view, this desk, this corner of the 32nd floor. And now that she had it, she couldn't remember why she'd wanted it so badly. Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. Miss Cross, your 10 o'clock is here. Send them in. The day became a blur of faces and voices and decisions that affected hundreds of people she would never meet. A distribution center in Ohio needed restructuring. A supplier contract required renegotiation. A lawsuit threatened one of their subsidiaries. She handled each one with the same precise detachment. Problems were puzzles, puzzles had solutions. Emotions only complicated the math. At 2:15 her phone buzzed with a notification she'd been expecting. Dr. Reiner's office, results from her annual physical. She opened the message, read it twice, then closed the app and returned to work. The numbers were not good. They were not catastrophic either, but they were a warning. Her body was telling her something she'd spent years refusing to hear. Slow down, rest, remember that you are made of flesh and blood, not glass and steel. She ignored it the way she'd ignored every warning her body had ever sent. There was too much to do, too many people depending on her. She would deal with it later. Later was where she kept all the things she couldn't face. At 4:30 an email arrived from an address she didn't expect. Claire.cross@gmail.com. Her daughter. They hadn't spoken in 3 months. Not since Claire's birthday dinner when Evelyn had spent most of the evening on her phone handling a crisis in Singapore. Claire had left before dessert, hadn't returned her calls since. She opened the email. Mom, I've been trying to write this for weeks. I don't even know if you'll read it. You probably have 17 meetings scheduled and I'm just another item on your to-do list. But I need to say this. You were never there. Not really. Even when you were sitting across the table from me, you were somewhere else. Thinking about work, checking your phone, planning your next move. I spent my whole childhood trying to get your attention. Trying to be good enough, smart enough, successful enough to make you see me. It never worked. Nothing ever worked. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just tired. I'm tired of waiting for a mother who was never coming. I hope your company is worth it. I hope all those late nights and missed recitals and empty promises were worth it, because you traded me for them. And I don't think you even noticed. Evelyn read the email 3 times. Her face didn't change. Her hands didn't shake. She had trained herself long ago to receive blows without flinching. But something shifted in her chest. A small crack in a wall she'd spent decades building. She closed the laptop, stood up, walked to the window. For the first time in years she actually looked at the view. The city stretched out before her like a kingdom. Her kingdom, built on sacrifice and strategy and the relentless belief that success would fill the emptiness inside her. It hadn't. The emptiness was still there, bigger now, hungrier. A black hole that consumed everything she fed it and demanded more. Her assistant's voice came through the intercom again. Miss Cross, your 5 o'clock is waiting in conference room B. She didn't answer. Instead she picked up her coat, her keys, walked past her assistant without a word, took the elevator to the parking garage, got in her car. Miss Cross, her assistant's voice came through her phone. Should I reschedule the meeting? Cancel it. Cancel it. But the Hendricks deal. Cancel everything for today. She hung up, started the engine, pulled out of the garage into the gray afternoon light. She didn't know where she was going. That was the strangest part. Evelyn Cross always knew where she was going. Always had a plan, a destination, a purpose. But now she was just driving. Away from the building, away from the meetings, away from the life she'd constructed so carefully that she'd forgotten she was trapped inside it. The city gave way to suburbs. Suburbs gave way to something older, industrial, forgotten. She drove until the buildings grew smaller and the streets grew emptier and the sky seemed closer somehow, like she could reach up and touch it if she tried. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Evelyn Cross had no idea what came next, and that terrified her more than anything. The wind came from the north, sharp, bitter, carrying the smell of rust and old rain. Evelyn's car made a sound she'd never heard before. A grinding, then a cough, then silence. The engine died in the middle of a road she didn't recognize, surrounded by warehouses that hadn't been used in years. She turned the key. Nothing. Tried again. The dashboard lights flickered once and went dark. She sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring through the windshield at a world that looked like it belonged to a different century. Cracked concrete. Chain-link fences crowned with rust, weeds pushing through every crack like they were reclaiming what had always been theirs. This was not Lakeview Heights. This was not anywhere she'd ever been. And her car, her $70,000 German-engineered vehicle with its heated seats and its premium sound system had chosen this exact moment to stop working. She pulled out her phone, called her assistant, voicemail, called roadside assistance. 20 minutes on hold before a voice told her the wait time was 2 to 3 hours. She hung up, sat in the silence. The cold was already seeping through the windows. She'd left her heavier coat at the office. Of course she had, because she hadn't planned to be here. Hadn't planned to be anywhere except her next meeting. A knock on her window. She turned. A man stood outside. Dark skin, gray hair at his temples, work jacket that had seen better years. He was holding a rag in one hand and a wrench in the other. His face held no threat, only curiosity, maybe concern. Engine trouble. She didn't roll down the window. Her hand hovered over the lock button. I'm fine. I've called for help. Help's gonna be a while out here, he said. This area's not exactly priority service. He gestured toward a building behind him. An old warehouse with a faded sign she couldn't read. I was working on a generator in there. Heard your engine cut out. That grinding sound you heard. Probably your alternator. Maybe the serpentine belt. Either way, you're not going anywhere without a tow. She studied him through the glass. Tried to read his intentions the way she read business partners. Looking for the angle. The leverage. The hidden agenda. She found nothing. Just a man with dirty hands and patient eyes waiting for her to decide whether to trust him. I can take a look, he said. No charge. If it's something I can fix here, I'll fix it. If not, I've got a friend with a tow truck who won't try to rob you. Why would you do that? The question seemed to surprise him. He tilted his head slightly. Considered it. Because your car's broken and you're stuck and it's cold and I know how to help. He shrugged. Doesn't seem like a complicated decision to me. She sat with that answer. In her world nothing was without complication. Every offer came with strings. Every kindness was currency to be spent later. But this man wasn't speaking that language. He was speaking something older, simpler, something she'd forgotten existed. She unlocked the door, stepped out into the wind. It cut through her blazer like it wasn't there. Pop the hood, he said. Already walking toward the front of the car. She reached inside and pulled the lever. The hood rose with a soft click. He propped it open and leaned in, his eyes moving over the engine with a focus that reminded her of surgeons she'd seen in operating rooms. Methodical, unhurried, reading something invisible to everyone else. Name's Caleb, he said without looking up. She hesitated, considered giving a fake name, decided that was ridiculous. Evelyn. Nice to meet you, Evelyn. He pointed at something deep in the engine. Your serpentine belt snapped. See there. That's why you lost power steering and the alternator stopped charging. Good news is it's not expensive. Bad news is I don't have a belt that fits this particular vehicle, so I need a tow. Yeah, but not from one of those chains. They'll charge you $400 to haul you 20 miles, and then another $200 for diagnostic fees that don't mean anything. He pulled out his phone. Old model, cracked screen. Let me call Marcus. He'll take you wherever you need to go, charge you fair. She watched him make the call, watched the easy way he spoke, the casual trust in his voice, the complete absence of suspicion or calculation. This was a man who moved through the world expecting nothing and offering everything. She didn't understand it. People like this shouldn't exist. They got taken advantage of. They got crushed by systems that rewarded ruthlessness and punished generosity. But here he was, standing in a forgotten industrial zone with engine grease on his fingers, helping a stranger for no reason at all. Marcus will be here in about 20 minutes, Caleb said, tucking his phone away. You're welcome to wait in the warehouse. It's warmer. Got a space heater running. I'm fine out here. Suit yourself. He closed the hood, wiped his hands on the rag. Then he looked at her properly for the first time. Not at her clothes or her car or the watch on her wrist that cost more than most people made in a month. At her. You look tired. The observation landed somewhere unexpected. No one had said that to her in years. Not her assistant. Not her board members. Not her daughter. They saw the CEO. The machine. The woman who never stopped and never slowed and never showed weakness. This man, this stranger had looked at her for 5 minutes and seen something they'd all missed. I am tired, she heard herself say. He nodded, didn't offer advice, didn't try to fix it, just accepted the truth of it and let it sit there between them. Come inside, he said. I'll make coffee. It's not good coffee but it's hot. She followed him. The warehouse was exactly what she expected. Concrete floors, exposed beams, equipment that looked like it had been rescued from a dozen different places. But there was warmth here too. a space heater glowing orange in the corner, a workbench organized with surprising precision, a small table with 2 folding chairs and a coffee maker that had to be older than her company. He poured her a cup. Black. She didn't normally drink black coffee. She took it anyway. The heat spread through her fingers, her palms, her wrists. She hadn't realized how cold she'd gotten. "What are you doing out here?" she asked. "This doesn't seem like a place where business happens." "It's not. Building's been empty for years, but the owner lets me use the space to work on bigger projects, stuff that won't fit in my garage." He gestured toward the generator in the corner. "That's for a community center on the south side. Their main unit died and they can't afford a new one. I'm rebuilding this one from parts. Should be ready by next week. They're paying you." "Not much." "Some." "Then why do it?" He looked at her with something that might have been confusion, or pity. She couldn't tell which. "Because they need it, and I can do it." "Seems like that's enough." She drank her coffee, tried to remember the last time she'd done something simply because it was needed, because she could, without calculating the return on investment, without measuring the strategic value. She couldn't remember. Maybe because there was nothing to remember. "What do you do, Evelyn?" The question was casual, innocent. He was just making conversation, but she felt the weight of the answer pressing against her chest. "I run a company." "What kind of company?" "Logistics, shipping, distribution." She paused. "We move things from where they are to where people want them to be." He nodded slowly. "That sounds important." "It is, on paper." His eyebrows rose slightly. He didn't push, just let the silence make room for whatever she wanted to say next. "I built it from nothing," she said. 26 years, thousands of employees, operations in 32 states, and today I sat in my office and realized I couldn't remember why any of it mattered." The confession surprised her. She hadn't planned to say it, hadn't even fully formed the thought until it was already leaving her mouth. But something about this place, this man, this moment outside the boundaries of her normal life made it possible to speak truths she usually buried. "You ever feel like that?" she asked. "Like you've been building something your whole life and then one day you look up and realize it's not what you thought it was?" Caleb set down his coffee cup, stared into it for a moment. "I feel like I've been building something my whole life and no one bothered to notice." He looked up. "So maybe we've got opposite problems." A horn honked outside. Marcus and his tow truck. Caleb stood up. "That's your ride." She stood too, reached into her purse, pulled out $200 bills. "For your time, and the coffee." He looked at the money. "Didn't take it. My time was free. The coffee was about 12 cents. Please, let me pay you something." "For what?" "I didn't fix your car, just kept you company for 20 minutes. He smiled. It changed his whole face, made him look younger, lighter. "Keep your money, Evelyn. Go home, get some rest. Whatever's chasing you, it'll still be there tomorrow. But tomorrow you might have the strength to face it." She stood there with the bills in her hand. No one had refused her money in years. No one had ever offered her advice without being asked. She didn't know what to do with either. "Thank you," she said finally. "Take care of yourself." She walked out to the tow truck, gave Marcus the address of a garage she trusted, got in the cab. As they pulled away, she looked back at the warehouse. Caleb was standing in the doorway watching her leave. He raised one hand, a small wave, then he turned and went back inside. The ride took 40 minutes. She spent the entire time thinking about a man who fixed things for people who couldn't pay, who refused money from a stranger, who looked at her expensive clothes and her expensive watch and saw only a tired woman who needed coffee. Something had shifted. She could feel it. A crack in the foundation of everything she'd built. She didn't know yet whether that crack would bring everything down or let something new grow through. But she knew she would see him again. She had to. 3 days later, Evelyn's assistant placed a folder on her desk. "The repair estimate for your vehicle," she said, "and the contact information you requested." The estimate was reasonable. The contact information was something else entirely. Caleb Miller, a home address in Southfield, a phone number, a brief background check that Evelyn had ordered out of habit and now felt ashamed of ordering. He had no criminal record,
no debt beyond a modest mortgage, a wife who taught elementary school, a daughter with a 4.2 GPA, and dreams of becoming an engineer. A life that was small by her standards and enormous by any measure that actually mattered. She stared at the page, thought about what she wanted, thought about why. The next morning she drove to Southfield, not her usual car which was still being repaired. A rental, something ordinary, something that wouldn't announce her arrival like a press release. She parked across the street from a house that was clean but not fancy, looked at it for 10 minutes, then she got out and knocked on the door. Caleb opened it. The surprise on his face lasted only a second before it was replaced by that same patient warmth she remembered. "Evelyn, I hope I'm not intruding." "Never." He stepped aside. "Come in." The house was exactly what she should have expected and nothing like the world she lived in. Furniture that had been bought for comfort, not appearance. Family photos covering every available wall space. The smell of something cooking in the kitchen. Coffee and cinnamon and something else she couldn't name but recognized as home. It had been so long since anything felt like home. A woman appeared in the doorway to the kitchen. Warm eyes, curious smile, dish towel over her shoulder. "You must be the lady with the broken car," she said. "I'm Denise, Evelyn. Your husband was very kind to me the other day. He's kind to everyone. It's his worst flaw." Denise's smile took the edge off the words. "Stay for lunch. We were just sitting down. I couldn't impose."
It's not an imposition if you're invited. Evelyn found herself sitting at a table that had too many scratches and not enough chairs. Caleb brought an extra one from the garage. His daughter Maya joined them after a few minutes. A quiet girl with her father's eyes and her mother's directness. She studied Evelyn with an openness that felt almost uncomfortable. No pretense, no performance, just curiosity. The food was simple: chicken, rice, vegetables from a garden in the backyard. Evelyn couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a meal she hadn't ordered from a restaurant or picked up from a service. Couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten with people who weren't trying to get something from her. "Caleb tells me you run a company," Denise said. "Yes, logistics. That sounds exhausting." "It is." "Then why do it?" The question was so simple it almost hurt. Evelyn set down her fork, considered a dozen possible answers. The true one was the hardest. "Because I don't know how to do anything else." Caleb and Denise exchanged a look. The kind of look that comes from years of understanding someone without words. Evelyn had never had that with anyone. Not her ex-husband, not her daughter, not a single person in her entire life. "That's not true," Caleb said. "You just haven't tried." After lunch Evelyn helped clear the table. Denise protested. Evelyn insisted. She couldn't explain why, but she needed to do something useful. Something that didn't involve strategy or profit margins. Something as simple as carrying plates from one room to another. She found Caleb in the garage afterward, surrounded by tools and parts and the quiet satisfaction of a man in his element. "I have a proposal," she said. He looked up, waited. "One of my facilities needs a complete overhaul of its refrigeration system. It's a big job. Complex. The contractors we've used before are competent but uninspired. I want someone who actually cares about the work." She paused. "I want you." He wiped his hands on a rag, studied her face. "You don't know anything about my work. You've never seen what I can do." "I know enough. You know I helped you when your car broke down. That doesn't make me qualified for a corporate contract. I'm not offering you this because you helped me. I'm offering you this because you refused to take my money afterward." She stepped closer. "Every contractor I've ever hired was thinking about the next job before they finished the first one. Always calculating. Always looking for the angle. You're not like that. You fix things because they're broken and someone needs them fixed. I need someone who thinks like that." He was quiet for a long moment. She watched him weigh the offer, the opportunity against the risk, the hope against the experience. "I've been turned down for jobs like this before," he said finally. "Big companies, they look at me and see a guy with a garage workshop and no fancy certifications. They don't see what I can actually do. I see it. Do you? Or do you see a story you can tell yourself? The rich woman who gave a chance to the poor repairman. Because I'm not interested in being someone's charity case." The words stung. They were supposed to. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" She didn't have an answer ready, had to dig for it, find it buried under years of careful calculation. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe I'm trying to do something that actually matters for once. Maybe I'm tired of running a machine that makes money and nothing else. Maybe I met someone who reminds me that there's a different way to live and I'm not ready to pretend that didn't happen. She met his eyes. Give me a chance to prove I'm serious. That's all I'm asking. He held her gaze for a long time. Then he nodded. I'll take a look at the facility, see what needs doing. Then we'll talk numbers. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I haven't done anything. But he had. He just didn't know it. He'd cracked open a door she'd spent decades keeping locked. And now, for better or worse, light was starting to pour through. The Ashford Distribution Center sat on 40 acres of concrete and steel at the edge of the industrial corridor. Caleb arrived at 7 a.m., 30 minutes early, wearing his best work clothes, clean jeans, a collared shirt that Denise had ironed the night before, work boots that had seen years of use but were polished until they almost shone. He carried a toolbox in one hand and a folder of documentation in the other, certifications, references, proof that he belonged here even if his instincts told him he didn't. The facility manager met him at the security gate. A man named Vincent Paulson, pressed suit, expensive watch, smile that didn't reach his eyes. You must be the consultant Mrs. Cross sent. The emphasis on consultant was barely perceptible but unmistakable. Follow me. They walked through corridors of humming machinery, forklifts and conveyor belts and workers in company uniforms who barely looked up as they passed. Paulson kept 3 steps ahead, never looked back, spoke about the facility's importance to the company's southeast operations as if he were reading from a brochure. The refrigeration system serves 8 separate cold storage units, he said. We've had efficiency issues for months. Repair costs are climbing. The board wants solutions. What have your current contractors recommended? A complete replacement. $22 million. 18-month timeline. That seems extreme. Paulson finally turned around. His expression had shifted into something harder. Excuse me, for efficiency issues. Unless the core units are failing, which would show up in the maintenance logs, you're probably looking at problems with the distribution network. Valves, sensors, control systems. Those can usually be fixed for a fraction of replacement cost. Caleb kept his voice even, professional. But I'd need to see the technical specifications and run some diagnostics before I could say for certain. Paulson stared at him. Whatever he'd expected from the man Evelyn Cross had sent, this wasn't it. The technical office is this way, he said finally. The rest of the morning was spent reviewing documentation, specs and schematics and maintenance records going back 5 years. Caleb saw the problems almost immediately. Deferred maintenance, shortcuts that saved money in the short term but compounded into larger issues over time, systems that had been patched when they should have been properly repaired. It was a familiar story, the story of every company that prioritized quarterly reports over long-term sustainability. He was explaining his preliminary findings to a junior technician named Marcus, a young black man who actually seemed interested in learning, when Paulson returned with 2 other managers. Their expressions were not friendly. There's been a miscommunication, Paulson said. Mrs. Cross authorized a consultation, not a full diagnostic assessment. We can't have outside contractors accessing proprietary system data without proper clearance. I was told to assess the refrigeration system. That requires accessing the data. By whom? Mrs. Cross isn't here. And until we have written authorization confirming the scope of your engagement, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the technical areas. Caleb looked at the 3 men, 3 suits arranged in a wall of corporate authority. Behind them, other workers had stopped what they were doing, watching, waiting to see how this would play out. I understand, Caleb said. I'll wait in the lobby while you sort out the authorization. Actually, I think it would be better if you waited outside the building. Security protocols. The words hung in the air. Everyone understood what they meant, what they really meant. Caleb gathered his things, folder, toolbox, the documentation he'd been studying. He walked past the managers without looking at them, past the workers who quickly returned to their tasks, past the security desk where a guard handed him a visitor badge to surrender. Outside, the morning had turned cold. He stood in the parking lot next to his truck, a vehicle that looked out of place among the company's sedans and the executive SUVs, and waited. He didn't know for what. Didn't know if Evelyn would answer her phone. Didn't know if this had all been a mistake. 20 minutes passed. 30. His phone buzzed. "Mr. Miller, this is Ashford Corporate Headquarters. Miss Cross asked me to inform you that there's been an internal miscommunication regarding your consultation. She's currently in meetings and unavailable, but wanted you to know she's addressing the situation. When should I expect to hear more?" She didn't say. "I'm sorry, I don't have more information." He hung up, looked at the building, then he got in his truck and drove home. That night Denise found him in the garage, not working on anything, just sitting in the old chair by the window, staring at his hands. "Tell me," she said. So he told her everything. The managers, the security protocols, the way they'd looked at him like he was something that didn't belong and needed to be removed. "She'll fix it," Denise said. "Will she? You think she won't?" He rubbed his face. "Tired. So tired. I think she's powerful enough to fix anything she wants to fix. And I think that's not the same as wanting to fix it." He looked at his wife. "I've been in rooms like that before. Corporate rooms, where people like me are tolerated until we become inconvenient. Then we get handled, managed, shown the door with a smile and a handshake and a promise to be in touch that never comes. Evelyn's not like that. You met her once. I saw enough." Denise sat down next to him. "She's lost, Caleb. Anyone can see it, but she's trying to find her way. That's more than most people do. What if finding her way doesn't include me? What if I was just a symbol, something she could point to and say, look how different I am now? Then she wasn't worth your time anyway." Denise took his hand. "But I don't think that's what's happening. I think she saw something real in you and it scared her, and she's figuring out what to do with it. Give her time." He wanted to believe her. He always wanted to believe her. But he'd spent 53 years learning that hope was a luxury, and trust was a gamble, and the world rarely rewarded either one. The phone rang at 11 p.m. He almost didn't answer it. "Caleb, it's Evelyn. I'm so sorry." Her voice was different, raw, edges showing that he'd never heard before. "What happened today was unacceptable. I've spoken with Paulson, and with his supervisors, and with my legal team. What they did." She stopped, started again. "There's no excuse. I should have been there. Should have made sure everyone understood exactly who you were and why you were there and what would happen if anyone treated you as less than the professional I hired. But you weren't there." "No, I wasn't." A long pause. "I've spent my whole career building systems, processes, hierarchies that run without me. I thought that was success. Machines that don't need their creator anymore." Her voice dropped. "I didn't think about what those machines might do when no one's watching. What kind of people they create. What kind of harm they cause. And now I'm thinking about it. For the first time in a long time, I'm thinking about it." Silence stretched between them. Two people on opposite ends of a phone line, separated by miles and money and a lifetime of different experiences, connected by something neither of them fully understood. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "I'll be there personally, and Paulson won't. You fired him. I removed him from this project. What happens next depends on what I find when I start looking at how he's treated other people over the years." She paused. "I have a feeling I'm not going to like what I find." Caleb closed his eyes, let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "I'll be there at 7. Thank you for giving me another chance." "Everybody deserves another chance, Evelyn. The question is what they do with it." He hung up. Denise was standing in the doorway watching him. "Well, she's trying," he said. "I guess we'll see if trying is enough." Evelyn arrived at the distribution center at 6:30 a.m., earlier than she'd arrived anywhere in years. The security guard nearly dropped his coffee when he saw her walk through the front door. "Miss Cross, we weren't expecting." "I know. Where's the night shift supervisor?" She spent the next hour walking the floor, talking to workers, asking questions she'd never thought to ask before. "How long have you been here? Do you feel like you can raise concerns? Has anyone ever made you feel unwelcome?" The answers were careful at first, rehearsed. The kind of things employees say when the CEO is standing in front of them with a clipboard. But she kept pushing, kept listening.
And slowly the truth began to emerge. Stories of managers who cut corners and blamed the workers when things went wrong. Stories of complaints that disappeared into bureaucratic black holes. Stories of qualified candidates passed over for promotions that went to people who looked a certain way, talked a certain way, knew the right people. Stories of a system that was supposed to be fair and efficient and was neither. Caleb arrived at 7. Found Evelyn in the break room sitting at a table with 3 maintenance workers taking notes. Miss Cross. She looked up. Her face was pale, drawn like someone who'd received bad news and was still processing it. Caleb. Good. I need you to see something. She led him to Paulson's office. The former manager's things were already being packed by HR. On the desk sat a stack of employee complaints, incident reports, performance reviews that had been buried or altered. I spent last night reading personnel files, she said. Paulson has been here 11 years. In that time he's received 17 formal complaints from workers. Not one of them resulted in any disciplinary action. Not one. She picked up a folder. This man was fired 3 years ago for performance issues. The real reason, according to his co-workers, was that he reported safety violations that Paulson wanted ignored. The violations are still there, still unreported. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. She set down the folder. I built this company. Every policy, every process, every chain of command. I thought I was building something efficient, something that would run smoothly without constant oversight. But what I actually built was a system that protects people like Paulson and crushes people like the man in that file. Like you. Caleb didn't say anything. Just watched her struggle with the weight of her own creation. The refrigeration system, she said suddenly. Tell me what you found. He walked her through his preliminary assessment. The deferred maintenance, the patchwork repairs, the problems that could have been prevented with basic attention and were now going to cost millions to fix. But it's not the equipment that's the real issue, he said. It's the culture. Your contractors recommend replacement because that's what makes them money. Your managers approve it because no one wants to admit they let things get this bad on their watch. And the workers on the floor, the ones who actually know what's broken and how to fix it, nobody asks them. Nobody listens. Because the system isn't designed to listen. No, it's not. Evelyn walked to the window, stared out at the warehouse floor below. Hundreds of people moving with precision, doing jobs that kept her company running, making decisions she would never see and solving problems she would never know existed. I have a board meeting next week, she said. Quarterly review. They're expecting efficiency reports and growth projections, and a confident CEO who has everything under control. She turned to face him. What if instead I told them the truth? That our systems are failing because our culture is failing. That we've prioritized profit over people for so long, we've forgotten what we're actually supposed to be doing. They'd think you'd lost your mind. Maybe I have. She almost smiled. Or maybe I've finally found it. The board meeting happened 5 days later. Evelyn presented her findings without softening them. The deferred maintenance, the buried complaints, the manager who had been protected despite years of documented misconduct. She named names, showed receipts, laid bare the gap between who they claimed to be and who they actually were. The room went silent. Then the questions started. Hard questions, skeptical questions, questions designed to poke holes in her conclusions and protect the status quo. You're suggesting we need a complete cultural overhaul based on what? A few disgruntled employees and some old complaints. I'm suggesting we've built a company that treats people as interchangeable parts and we're surprised when they don't care about outcomes that don't affect them. I'm suggesting that the same values that created this problem will not fix it. And what exactly do you propose? She took a breath. A fundamental restructuring of how we identify and develop leadership. An independent review of every facility's management practices. A system for employee feedback that actually reaches decision makers. And a new position, head of workforce development, focused entirely on ensuring that we're not just efficient but ethical. More silence. Then from the far end of the table, who would fill this position? Evelyn looked at the assembled faces, men and women she'd worked with for years, People who measured success in quarterly earnings and stock prices and market share. People who had never not once asked whether their success came at someone else's expense. His name is Caleb Miller. He's a maintenance contractor who's been fixing things in this community for 30 years. He has no corporate experience, no MBA, no connections. What he has is an understanding of how things actually work at the ground level. And he has something else that I've realized is rare in this company. She paused. He has integrity. The meeting lasted another 2 hours. By the end, nothing had been decided, but something had shifted. A crack in the foundation. A question that wouldn't go away. Evelyn walked out of the conference room feeling lighter than she had in years, and heavier, because now she knew what needed to be done, and she knew it would cost her everything. The following morning she called Caleb. "I need to apologize to you," she said. "For what?" "For everything. For what happened at the facility. For the system that made it possible. For building a company that would treat someone like you as less than what you are." Her voice cracked slightly. "You deserved better. Everyone who's ever been made to feel small by something I created deserved better." Silence on the line. "Then I've heard a lot of apologies in my life, Evelyn. Most of them didn't mean much. I know. So what makes this one different? Because I'm not just going to say I'm sorry. I'm going to change what I'm sorry for." She steadied herself. "I'd like you to come to my office. There's something I want to offer you. And I want you to be able to say no if it's not right for you." He came that afternoon, sat across from her desk in the office she'd spent years earning, and was now preparing to lose. She explained the position, the scope, the challenges, the near certainty that the board would resist and the shareholders would complain, and the easy path would be to fire her and find someone who would tell them what they wanted to hear. "Why me?" he asked. "Because you already know what needs to be done. You've known it your whole life. You just never had the power to do it. And you think giving me power will fix your company. No, I think giving you a platform will give other people permission to speak up, to push back, to demand better." She leaned forward. "I'm not offering you a job, Caleb. I'm offering you a chance to prove that the way you've lived your life is actually possible at scale. That kindness isn't weakness. That integrity isn't inefficiency. That doing the right thing can be the same as doing the smart thing." He sat with that for a long time. She watched him weigh it. The hope against the risk. The possibility against the probability. "And if I fail, then we fail together. And at least we'll know we tried." He stood up, extended his hand. "I'll need to talk to Denise. Of course. And I'll need certain guarantees. In writing. About how my workers will be treated. About what happens if the board decides to cut costs by cutting people. Whatever you need." He shook her hand. His grip was firm, calloused, real. "I'll let you know by end of week." He let her know in 2 days. The answer was yes. 3 months into his new role, Caleb had already made enemies. Not the kind that threaten you openly. The kind that smile in meetings and undermine you in emails. The kind that call your ideas interesting, while working to ensure they never get implemented. But he'd also made allies. Workers who'd never been asked for their opinions suddenly found someone who wanted to hear them. Mid-level managers who'd grown cynical discovered that change was actually possible if someone at the top was willing to fight for it. A network of people who believed in what he was trying to do, even when the obstacles seemed insurmountable. Evelyn watched it all with a mixture of pride and something she couldn't quite name. Humility, maybe. The recognition that this man she'd found by accident, in a broken-down industrial zone, on the worst day of her professional life, was accomplishing things she'd never managed in decades of leadership. Not because he was smarter or more experienced, because he was willing to be vulnerable, willing to admit what he didn't know, willing to ask for help. She'd never been willing to ask for help. She was learning. One evening she drove to Southfield, not for a meeting, not with any agenda, just because the pull toward this family had become something she couldn't ignore. Denise opened the door before she knocked. "Saw you sitting in your car for 10 minutes. Thought you might need an invitation. I didn't want to intrude. You keep saying that. Come inside." The house was warm in the way her penthouse never was. full of sounds and smells and evidence of life being lived rather than managed. Caleb was in the kitchen helping Maya with calculus homework. The sight of it, a father and daughter hunched over textbooks, arguing good-naturedly about derivatives, made something ache in Evelyn's chest. "Miss Cross is here," Denise announced. Caleb looked up, smiled. "Pull up a chair. We're trying to figure out why the limit of this function doesn't exist. It's because the left and right limits approach different values," Evelyn said without thinking. "The function is continuous from both directions, but the values don't converge." Maya stared at her. "You know calculus." "I was a mathematics major before I switched to business." She sat down at the table. "May I?"
For the next hour she worked through problems with Maya, explained concepts in ways that made the girl's eyes light up with understanding. It felt good, simple, useful in a way that board meetings never were. Afterward, Denise served dinner. Evelyn tried to decline. Denise ignored her. "You're skinny," she said. "CEOs need to eat too." Over pot roast and conversation, Evelyn found herself talking about things she'd never told anyone. Her childhood in a house where love was conditional on achievement. Her marriage that had ended because she'd chosen work over everything else. Her daughter who had every right to hate her and probably did. "Have you called her?" Denise asked. "Claire? No. I've started to, maybe 100 times. But what would I say? I'm sorry I was never there. I'm sorry I traded your childhood for stock options. I'm sorry I only know how to love things I can control." You could start with hello. "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple," Caleb said. He'd been quiet for most of the meal, listening. "You're making it complicated because you're scared. Scared she'll reject you. Scared you don't deserve another chance. But complicated is what people use to avoid doing hard things. Simple is just harder to hide behind." The words landed somewhere deep. Evelyn set down her fork. "You don't understand. The things I've done, the choices I've made. You can't change the past," Caleb interrupted. "No one can. But you can change what comes next. That's all any of us can do." She wanted to argue, to explain why her situation was different, her failures more unforgivable, her mistakes more permanent, but she couldn't. Because she knew he was right. She'd known it for years, she'd just been too afraid to act on it. "There's something else," she said quietly. "Something I haven't told anyone." Denise reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture was so unexpected, so maternal that Evelyn almost pulled away. "My health. The doctors found something. They're still running tests, but..." She couldn't finish the sentence. The silence that followed was different from any silence she'd experienced in boardrooms. This was a silence of presence rather than absence, of people sitting with her in uncertainty rather than trying to fix it or dismiss it. "When do you find out more?" Caleb asked. "Next week. Do you want company? When you go to the appointment." The offer broke something open inside her. No one had offered to accompany her anywhere in years. No one had thought she might need support. She'd cultivated that image so carefully. The woman who needed nothing, who handled everything, who never showed weakness, that she'd made herself into an island. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know what I want. I don't know how to need people." "That's okay," Denise said. "You're learning." That night, after Evelyn left, Caleb sat on the porch with his wife. The autumn air was cold, but neither of them moved to go inside. "She's changing," Denise said. "Maybe." "You don't think so?" He considered the question, thought about all the wealthy people he'd encountered over the years, the ones who talked about wanting to be different and then returned to their old patterns the moment it got uncomfortable, the ones who used people like him as props in stories they told themselves about their own goodness. "I think she wants to change. I think she's trying, but wanting and trying aren't the same as doing." He looked at his wife. "And I think she's running out of time to figure out the difference. Because of her health. Because of everything. Her health, her company, her family. She's built a whole life out of control and efficiency, and now all of it's falling apart at once. The question is whether she can build something new from the pieces or whether she'll just try to put the old thing back together." Denise leaned her head against his shoulder. "What do you think she'll choose?" "I don't know, but I know what I'm going to do." "What's that?" "Keep showing up. Keep telling the truth. Keep being the same person whether she's watching or not." He put his arm around his wife. "That's all any of us can do. Be who we are and hope it matters." The stars were bright above Southfield, somewhere across the city, in a penthouse that cost more than most people would earn in a lifetime. Evelyn Cross sat alone with her phone in her hand, staring at her daughter's number, trying to find the courage to press call. She didn't call that night, but she was getting closer. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. By 8:45, Evelyn knew it would be the last one she attended as CEO. The signs had been building for weeks. Whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Emails that CC'd people who shouldn't be involved. A subtle shift in how certain directors looked at her, not with respect anymore, but with calculation. She'd seen enough corporate coups to recognize the pattern. She was watching one unfold against herself. The charges, when they were finally presented, were dressed in the language of fiduciary responsibility. Questions have been raised about recent strategic decisions. Concerns about the company's direction, a need for leadership that balances innovation with stability. What they meant was she'd started caring about workers more than stock prices, and the shareholders had noticed. The board has voted to recommend a leadership transition, the chairman said. He was a man she'd known for 15 years, had dinner at his home, attended his daughter's wedding. Now he couldn't meet her eyes. We believe it's in the best interest of the company to bring in someone with a more traditional approach. Traditional meaning what, exactly? Someone who prioritizes shareholder value and employee welfare, community impact, the long-term sustainability that comes from treating people as more than production units. Those are important considerations, but they can't come at the expense of financial performance. She looked around the room, 12 faces, most of them avoiding her gaze. 2 years ago, these same people had praised her vision, celebrated her leadership, called her a pioneer of modern business practice. Now they were discarding her for the sin of developing a conscience. What about the Workforce Development Initiative? It will be evaluated by the new leadership, which means it will be dismantled. No one answered. They didn't need to. Evelyn stood, gathered her things. 26 years of building this company, and she was leaving with a leather bag and a heart that was somehow lighter than it had been in decades. "You're making a mistake," she said. "Not for me, I'll be fine, but for every person in this company who finally started to believe that things could be different, that their voices mattered, that the system wasn't designed to crush them." She walked to the door, stopped, turned back. "I hope you can live with what you're about to undo." She walked out, didn't look back. Caleb was waiting in the lobby. She'd asked him to come, knowing how this would end, needing someone real to walk out with. "It's done?" he asked. "It's done." They walked to the parking garage together. Her heels echoed against concrete. His work boots made barely any sound. Two people from different worlds, meeting in the middle of something neither fully understood. "What happens now?" he asked. "To me, severance package, board seat at some other company if I want it. Plenty of money and no idea what to do with it." She stopped beside her car. "To you, that depends on what you decide. They offered me a choice, leave with a settlement or stay under new management. New direction, they called it. Back to basics." "Which basics?" "The ones where people like you get shown the door for asking too many questions." "Something like that." She shook her head. "Don't stay. Don't let them use you to pretend things haven't changed. You're worth more than being a symbol they can point to while they dismantle everything we built." He leaned against the car, crossed his arms, looked at her with that steady gaze that always seemed to see more than it should. "What would you do, if you were me?" "I'd burn it down." She almost laughed. "But that's me, always ready to fight, even when fighting doesn't help." "And if there was another way?" "What other way?" He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, handed it to her. It was a proposal. A non-profit organization focused on workforce development and community training programs. A board of directors that included local business owners, educators, union representatives. A mission statement that read "Building human capacity one person at a time." Where did this come from? "Marcus at the distribution center. The technician you met on your first visit. He's been working on it for months. Didn't think anyone would take it seriously until you came along." Caleb pointed to a name on the proposed board. "He wants you involved, as a founder, not for your money," he made that clear, "for your experience, your connections, your ability to make things happen." Evelyn stared at the paper. A non-profit, no shareholders, no quarterly reports, no board members angling for advantage, just work that needed doing and people willing to do it. I don't know anything about nonprofits. You didn't know anything about logistics when you started your company. You learned. That was different. How? She couldn't answer, because it wasn't different. It was exactly the same. A problem that needed solving, a gap that needed filling, a chance to build something that mattered. I'll think about it, she said. Don't think too long. Good opportunities don't wait for people to finish being scared. She drove home, packed a bag, made a phone call she'd been avoiding for months. Mom? Claire's voice was guarded, surprised. Why are you calling? Because I should have called months ago, years ago. Because I've spent my whole life making excuses for why I couldn't be what you needed, and I'm done making excuses. She closed her eyes. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for another chance. I'm just asking if you'll let me try. If you'll let me show you who I'm learning to become instead of who I've always been. Silence on the line. Long enough that Evelyn thought she'd hung up. I'm in Portland, Claire finally said. If you want to talk, you can come here. But I'm not coming to you. Not this time. I'll be there tomorrow. Mom? Yes? Don't promise anything you can't keep. I've had enough of those. I know. I'm not promising anything. I'm just showing up. That's all I can offer. She hung up, booked a flight, sat in her empty penthouse as the sun went down and the city lights came on, and the life she'd built for 26 years dissolved into something she couldn't predict. It should have felt like failure. It should have felt like loss. But it didn't. It felt like possibility, like the space that opens when you finally let go of something you've been gripping too tight. She called Caleb one more time before she left. I'm going to Portland, to see my daughter. Good. And when I get back I want to talk about that proposal. Marcus's nonprofit. It's not Marcus's nonprofit, it's ours. If we want it to be. Ours. Yours, mine, Denise's. Anyone who believes that the way things are isn't the way they have to be. He paused. That's how change works, Evelyn. Not one person with power. A lot of people with purpose. She let that sink in. A lot of people with purpose. It was such a simple idea, so different from everything she'd ever believed about leadership and success and the way the world worked. I'll see you when I get back, she said. Safe travels. And Evelyn, yes, whatever happens with your daughter, whatever she says, however she reacts, you're doing the right thing. Showing up is the right thing, even if it doesn't feel like it. She thanked him, hung up, picked up her bag and walked out the door. The penthouse was empty behind her. The company was gone. The power was gone. The identity she'd worn like armor for decades was gone. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't alone. 1 year later, the building wasn't much to look at. A converted warehouse on the edge of Southfield, not far from where Evelyn's car had broken down on that cold afternoon. But inside something was happening that couldn't be measured in square footage or property values. 32 people sat at workbenches, learning to repair small engines. Another 18 were in the next room, practicing electrical wiring. Upstairs, a class on HVAC fundamentals was wrapping up. The instructor, Marcus, now full-time, walking students through the anatomy of a compressor. The Southfield Community Training Center had opened 6 months ago. It had already graduated 87 people into jobs that paid living wages, had partnerships with 15 local businesses, had a waiting list of students that stretched into next year. Caleb stood at the back of the engine repair classroom, watching a young woman named Danielle diagnose a problem with a generator. Her hands moved the way his did, careful, patient, listening. She'd come to the program unemployed, raising 2 kids on her own, convinced she'd never amount to anything. Now she was 3 weeks from graduation and had 2 job offers waiting. She's got the gift, Denise said, appearing beside him. She was teaching literacy classes 2 days a week, said retirement from the school system had been boring, said she needed to be useful. Caleb knew the truth. She was exactly where she belonged. She does, he agreed. Better instincts than most people I've worked with, including the ones with fancy degrees. He smiled. Especially those. The front door opened. Evelyn walked in, stomping mud off her boots. She'd traded the designer clothes for something more practical. Jeans, work shirt, hair tied back. She still carried herself like a CEO, that particular quality of expecting the world to make room. But there was something softer now, something human. Portland flight was delayed, she said.
dropping a bag on the reception desk. Claire sends her love. How is she? Good. Really good. Evelyn's face did something it had rarely done in the old days. It relaxed into genuine happiness. She's thinking about moving back, wants to get involved here if there's room. There's always room, Caleb said. That's kind of the point. They walked through the building together, past classrooms and workshops and a small kitchen where someone was always making coffee, past bulletin boards covered with job listings and success stories and photos of graduates with their new employers, past a wall where students had started writing messages to each other and to themselves. You can do this. Don't give up. Someone believed in me. Now I believe in myself. Evelyn stopped in front of that wall, read the messages, touched the paper like she was confirming it was real. I ran a company with 10,000 employees, she said quietly. Moved products across 32 states, generated hundreds of millions in revenue, and none of it felt like this. Like what? Like it mattered. He didn't argue, didn't point out all the ways her old company had mattered, the jobs it created, the services it provided, the economic activity it generated, because he understood what she meant. The difference between doing things that have impact and doing things that have meaning. The difference between building a machine and building a community. You ready for lunch? Denise asked, appearing with her coat on. Maya's meeting us at the restaurant. She's bringing that boy she's been seeing. The engineering student. The same one. I think it's getting serious. They walked outside together, the three of them and then four when Maya arrived with her boyfriend, a quiet young man named Thomas who looked at her like she was the most important person in the world. The restaurant was nothing fancy, a family place with checkered tablecloths and portions too big for one person, and a waitress who knew everyone by name. Evelyn ordered the pot roast, same thing Denise had made her that first night at their house. She didn't say why, didn't need to. Some things were understood without speaking. I got the grant notification this morning, she said, between bites. The Federal Workforce Development Fund, we're approved for next year. How much? Enough to double our enrollment, open a satellite location on the east side, maybe start a program for returning citizens. Caleb set down his fork. Returning citizens? You mean people coming out of prison? Is that a problem? No, he shook his head, laughed softly. A year ago you were running a company that probably wouldn't hire someone with a record. Now you want to build programs specifically for them. A year ago I was a different person. Were you, or were you just pretending to be? She considered the question, thought about all the years she'd spent constructing an identity that was designed to win, to dominate, to protect herself from the kind of vulnerability that came with actually caring about people. Maybe both, she said finally. Maybe I was pretending so hard I forgot there was anything else. And now I'm trying to remember. Lunch stretched into the afternoon. Conversation drifted from work to family to stories from childhood to plans for the future. Thomas talked about his research project, something involving renewable energy and grid stability that made Maya's eyes light up with pride. Denise told embarrassing stories about Caleb from when they were first dating. Evelyn laughed more than she'd laughed in years. This was what she'd given up everything for. Not power, not money, not the corner office with the commanding view. This table, these people, this feeling of belonging to something larger than herself. When the check came, Caleb tried to pay. Evelyn beat him to it. My turn. You paid last time. I'm paying this time too. Get used to it. They walked outside into the autumn afternoon. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and orange. The same light that had seemed so cold a year ago now felt warm, welcoming, like coming home after a long journey. Same time next week? Denise asked. Same time every week, Evelyn said. As long as you'll have me. Caleb put his hand on her shoulder. The gesture was simple, natural, the kind of touch that happens between people who have become family without planning to. We'll always have you, he said. That's what family does. She nodded, couldn't speak for a moment. The woman who had addressed shareholders and negotiated billion-dollar deals and never shown weakness in any boardroom, undone by a simple promise of belonging. Thank you, she managed finally. For what? For seeing me. That day when my car broke down. For seeing the person instead of the power. For believing I could be better than I was. I didn't do anything special, I just offered what I had. That's exactly what was special. She squeezed his hand. Not everyone does that. Not everyone can. They parted ways in the parking lot. Caleb and Denise heading back to their house in Southfield. Maya and Thomas driving to campus for an evening lecture. Evelyn standing alone beside her car, watching them go. She didn't feel alone anymore. That was the difference. The solitude that had defined her life for decades was gone, replaced by something she'd never thought she'd have. Connection, community, a family built not from blood but from choice, from showing up, from the simple radical act of being kind when no one required it. The sun dipped below the horizon. The first stars appeared. Evelyn got in her car and drove toward a future she couldn't predict but no longer feared. Because she wasn't building a machine anymore. She was building something that mattered, and that made all the difference. Kindness doesn't need power, but power needs kindness or it becomes just another form of violence.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.